Good evening. Happy New Year. It's Tom Albrecht here with the A team at Remax First in Calgary, specialist buyer's agent. My wife helps people sell homes. And I'm also co-on the team with her, but I'm also super interested in economics. You can check out my LinkedIn profile to kind of get a history on that. If you're not following us, feel free to do so. If you're not yet receiving the market report every month, which is sent out by email, it's a really good read. I think a lot of people really enjoy it. It's opened by about 50% of people every month. So just reach out to us and we'll sign you up. What happened in 2024? What do we think about 2025? And we'll also touch on the Fort McMurray market as well, because a lot of our clients and followers are active there or have properties there. 2024 was a very busy year. It was a banner year for sales across the region and similar levels to 2023. The second half of the year felt a lot slower than 2023, but it wasn't. It was pretty much the same. If you compare month to month, the first half was slightly busier than the second half. But the real difference was supply. So in 2022, rates increased significantly over about a 9-month period. Variable and fixed rates increased quite rapidly. But Calgary was super resilient to that. And we experienced that a lot. So a lot of our clients come from Rate My Agent, where we're ranked quite highly. And people from outside of the city, outside of the province, in fact, Ontario mainly, but also BC, were reaching out in droves, really for about 18 months. This was during the high interest rate. Our market was resilient because we had this sort of substitution within Canada, which is ironic, right? You see rates increase and we got more demand, right? So through net migration. It was also at the time a really big advertising campaign by the Alberta government. So driving people, pulling people here. So we experienced the tail end of that as well in the first half of last year. And then since that time, the new inquiries from out of province, in my experience, have fallen quite a lot. But the real difference between the first half of last year and the second half was supply. So it felt like rates eventually started to bite sellers, right? So it's people who were maybe up for renewal and they would be calling Brianna, thinking about selling, whether it's a rental property, there'd be various reasons, but the high cost of owning properties was starting to bite. And so we've seen a very, very big jump in supply throughout the year. The rate of new listings increased. The first few months, it was on par with the previous year. And by August through November, it was up about 40% as compared to the previous year. So it really took the heat off the market. We went from a situation, the first half of the month, I was taking Ubers between appointments and pricing houses on the way and writing offers, lots of offers per day for lots of clients, multiples all the time. And it was, that whole thing, it was fun and exciting. And as long as we do good pricing work, it's not necessarily a scary place to be, but that's what it was like the first half of the year. Second half of the year, way more relaxed. There was a lot more supply. Total inventory studies are kind of really increased. So we ended up the year with a bit of a split. The supply demand picture looks really different for apartments as to what it looks like for everything else. If you were to look today, you see that the apartments in Calgary have about 3 months of supply, which is a fairly balanced market indicator, pretty close to balanced market. And the conditions on the ground are at least balanced. In fact, we might see some values eroding ever so slightly. Whereas detached, semi-detached, and townhome have kind of continued to do their thing. There's only 2 months supply. And it also depends where you are in that price range for sure, between the various price ranges. And prices have pretty much held up, right? But we're definitely still in a low inventory environment. There's definitely still a housing shortage. The supply that has come on has been more mixed in Calgary than it has been in other parts of Canada over the last, we'll say, decade. There have been more detached homes, semi-detached townhomes built here. It's a little bit more balanced, but it's still largely apartments that are being built. I think it's 40% of new construction units are apartments. And a lot of them are purpose rentals, the majority, and then condos. And so rental rates have fallen by about 5% January to January, I believe, for a 2-bed in Calgary. And then that, of course, affects investors on the margin. And we've also had a lot of inquiries from people who want to sell condos that have been sold, usually from out of province, that bought them pre-sale, and they're looking to sell them. And interestingly, they don't necessarily have a whole ton of equity on those based on prices that they paid a couple of years ago pre-sales. So that's the picture. There's a bit of a split between those markets. So then the next question is, well, what about 2025? So, what's happening to policy? Rates have fallen pretty dramatically. So variable rates have fallen, I think, 175 basis points, so almost to 2 percentage points. Fixed rates are still sticky because they're related to the US, right? but variable rates have fallen significantly. And we've also got a whole bunch of other expansionary policies that have been approved and are going to go through. So CMHC will now lend or insure loans, mortgages up to 1.5 million as opposed to 1. And, you can refinance under certain circumstances now up to 90% as opposed to 80%. So there's a number of expansionary policies, and the housing market tends to respond very well to rates and other expansionary policies. So we're definitely into the next cycle. Calgary was really very resilient for the reasons we just talked about. And so now we're into the next cycle. And we're starting with, as I described, really a low inventory environment, only having 3,000 listings on the MLS right now compared to it would be maybe 5 or 6 in your average year over the last 10 years for this time of year. So it also sort of depends, I think, what you have as to what the future looks like. But, as long as it's not an apartment, I think we are ultimately expecting appreciation, although probably a little bit more moderate this year than some of the last 3 or 4 or 5 years. The timing of when things will pick up and heat up, and I think depends to a certain extent on politics this time, because we've got possible changes of government, but certainly changes of leadership federally. And we've got, obviously, just today, actually, inauguration of a new president in the United States. So there's a lot of uncertainty over what's going to happen, whether it's tariffs or global politics and war and oil and everything that affects us here. So it tends to be interest rates, unemployment, the oil price, and the exchange rate that has the biggest effects on the Calgary real estate market. So we'll see. And I would add to that immigration, probably. So the first four were kind of what used to affect the Calgary real estate market. I think immigration is huge at the moment. We don't know what immigration policy is going to look like going forward, but we do know there's a housing shortage, and that the number of homes available on the market or even in shadow inventory or just generally is not keeping up with Calgary's population. So we're looking at appreciation. We don't exactly know when. The Calgary Real Estate or the Canadian Real Estate Association believes that there's going to be like a kind of early spring. So we'll sort of have to see if that happens. But I think that's probably a likely scenario, we'll say. So that's pretty much it. I mean, I think if a person wanted to upsize, that's the other trend that we're seeing, is getting quite a lot of calls for people who want to sell their existing home because they've got a lot of equity now and buy a more expensive or a larger home because we're a family. So that makes sense, because in this higher rate world that we've existed in, the only parts of the market that didn't really go crazy were sort of like north of $1 million. So with rates falling, it's becoming more possible for people. The budgets are rising for people as rates fall. So we're expecting that move-up market to become stronger. If we have a strong move-up market in front of us and we're thinking about moving up, we should probably do that now, right? Sell our home before others hit the market and buy a home before they appreciate. The more expensive ones do. And then downsizes, maybe the advice would be the other way around. I mean, Calgary's a very big market. We also, when I say Calgary, I'm always talking about Chestermere, Okotoks, Airdrie, and Cochrane as well. And so there's 260 communities in Calgary. So we want to give very personalized advice for people and their own situations. And there's a million situations that people have. It's not all about money. In fact, selling at the right time, buying at the right time is a bit of a fool's game, in my experience. Fort McMurray is looking really interesting right now. It's clearly gone through a very difficult time. Anyone who owns property in Fort McMurray will know, or who used to. We have owned a few homes in Fort McMurray, and there's been, for anyone who doesn't know, the average detached home in Fort McMurray used to be $760, and it bottomed out at $380. And then apartments and townhomes, depending on the development, have been and are down sort of 50 to 80%. And so there's been a lot of suffering. And Brianna's looked at people across the table and seen grown men cry, and it's been really difficult for them. So we're at a place now in Fort McMurray where the worst is, I mean, I think all the bad stuff is over. I mean, the amount of bad news that Fort McMurray went through is a lot. It's a resilient population. It's a great set of people. It's an amazing community. And I'm so relieved to be able to finally, because I've always wanted to give very open and honest reports, but to be able to comment and say, look, I have confidence in it. It's really good. It's really nice. It's relieving. So I'm excited. I really hope that we see some appreciation. I think we probably will. I think there's more than one reason to move to Fort McMurray today. The rest of Canada is extremely expensive. And if you're a senior or you're struggling, especially if you have family in Fort McMurray and you want to be close, and it's cheap compared to a lot of Canada, not just the big cities. I'm super, super happy for the people of Fort McMurray that way. And we'll sort of see how it goes. Hopefully the scourge of foreclosures goes away over the coming years, because that's kind of the last thing dragging down certain types of houses. And I think we're going to see a really big move up market in Fort McMurray as well. I think there's a lot of people who do very well, and a lot of really good savers, and people with growing families. There's a whole, my generation, their families are growing, they're becoming teenagers. And, we showed up in 2006 and now we're super responsible. And so, yeah, I think people are going to want bigger homes. I mean, they're cheap. You can get an amazing house in Fort McMurray for $700,000. So yeah, really positive about that. So that's where we're at. There's a lot of unknowns, migration patterns. I mean, I think immigration policy is probably the number one thing I'd be really keeping an eye on for anyone interested in real estate in Canada or really anywhere, because it's demographics at the end of the day. That's what underpins it all, long term. And I think there's a question too. We saw a lot of people. So obviously when rates rose, domestic demand, people within Calgary, there's going to be less demand for product. But we also saw this net migration of people primarily from Toronto or BC, or from, in fact, out of the country, just choosing to come to Calgary because rates were high, because those markets were unaffordable on a monthly basis. And so now we're seeing a reversal of that, right? So we're seeing more domestic demand, like domestic from like people who've been here a while. And will we see a lot less migration? Will that continue? And I think the answer is probably yes. So I think anyone who says, hey, rates are falling, prices are going to go through the roof, I think that's one thing we really need to remember is that, well, no, probably not, right? We're quite well diversified. Not diversified, we're quite well hedged because of that process. And so in the future, if rates go up again and there's another rate rising cycle, then we might see that migration again, because Vancouver and Toronto will be even more expensive by then. So, I think we're catching that wave, but it takes time. Are we joining Vancouver and Toronto? And I say so, but I also think we don't want to get too carried away, because we do live in a big field, and so the supply curve looks very different in Calgary. I think where you buy and where you invest really matters in Calgary. I think city centre has got a very bright future, and the West, I think those are the places where we tend to try to help our clients focus their thoughts. So, but I mean, I could talk about that all day. This was already a very, very long video. If you watched to the end, I commend you. Have a wonderful day, and thank you very much. Yeah, if any questions about real estate ever, just reach out. We look forward to helping you. Thank you very much.